Hey, and welcome to All Things Social Security. My name is Stephanie Joy of Joy Disability, and you're about to see a piece of what goes on with our Wednesday live Q&A session. It's a live stream on this channel every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions and have them addressed on the spot on a first come, first served basis. Otherwise, I also want to welcome you to the channel generally. We have our 12 noon newer time frame, that is, shares of video tips and goings on that occur in the midst of any workday on Social Security and SSI matters, as well as beneficiary matters and other things that go on in our workday that we feel often helps claimants who are pro se and or have a representative, but it's just some information they want to get a better grasp on. So we share them here every day, and I welcome you to join us every day at noon. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Tiffany says, very hard to find a rheumatologist that treats fibromyalgia. Yes, I agree. She waited 6 months and then was told he doesn't treat. Sometimes you have to be relegated to your PCP. Do investigate. Maybe go on fibromyalgia boards, with other people and find out. Just say, does anyone know in so-and-so county of so-and-so state, anyone who's really fibromyalgia literate? It might not be a specialty like overtly, but sometimes you might find someone who specializes in chronic fatigue syndrome to also be proficient in fibromyalgia if that helps. But yeah, some rheumatologists don't give a hoot about FMS because they're like, it's not rheumatological. Well, maybe it's not. They don't really know, So it is really unfortunate. But when they say you have fibromyalgia, go see a shrink, that is so insulting and mean and incorrect. It's just, I hate the word offensive, but it's really offensive. How dare you say that to somebody who's in physical pain? Hey there. That was one of our little Q&A clips. I hope you found it informative or helpful or just enjoyable. I am attaching a related video that we have put together a while back that is on a similar topic and or an extension of what we were just talking about. So if you needed some more information on that, that's a place to start. You can also look in our playlists. There is a ton of them. I think there's over 1,000 videos. So there's almost every topic in the world touched upon in some way, shape, or form. And again, as a reminder, you can always put in the comments any kind of question you have, even if it's unrelated to this or any other video. I will talk to you later. Carry on. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I am catching up. It's late in the day here. Catching up with, well, it's about a week old now that Adriana posted it. She did a summary of a case in the Ninth Circuit. And, I love to read our case laws, even when they're outside of maybe the circuits that I'm most heavy in, because I do tend to hit all circuits. However, I always find them helpful. And this one is an unpublished opinion, so it might be a little less pervasive. However, I still find it helpful because I think the arguments in here could be used. And the dealio is about fibromyalgia. And that's what drew it to me particularly because we have so many claimants diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And it's very frustrating because despite the fact that the SSA policy is to acknowledge that it is an actual medical diagnosis and impairment, it gets the short shrift, shall we say, by adjudicators, ALJs, generally speaking. And it's probably why a lot of people with fibromyalgia, if that is their only significant diagnosis, will often find themselves without being able to get an attorney representative or a non-attorney representative potentially. So let's get to it. This is I might butcher it, Lynnee, Lynnnae case out of the Ninth Circuit. And I love the way Adriana lays it out. So in this particular case, Lynnee had been denied benefits and the district court had affirmed, and therefore it went to the circuit court. And that's where we tend to see these narratives, right? The court holdings when they're finally published for us. The Ninth Circuit reversed it. It goes into why the case was sent back to the judge for a redo, remand number 2. And here's what the ALJ apparently got wrong. So these are things that we can all use, whether we're pro se or representatives. So any representatives watching, this is something to take heed of with the fibromyalgia. So maybe more of us will be willing to take these cases, right? The ALJ dismissed the opinions of I'm going to say Dr. L, so I don't butcher it, and Dr. Valley, citing, quote, normal strength, reflexes, and no assistive device use. This is so utterly annoying. We see this all the time. This is my little added note here. where ALJs will disregard a treating doctor's opinion when we are fortunate enough to get a medical source opinion in addition to their records, because they will say that, well, in his records, he found her to have normal strength and normal reflexes on the day he examined her, which is what, a few times a year. And she didn't need a walker or a cane assistive device. And that's how you disregard the rest of the opinion? Nonsensical. So it goes on to say that and this is Adriana speaking, I believe, as every SSDI attorney handling fibromyalgia knows, normal physical exams don't negate fibromyalgia. Of course, fibromyalgia is one of those little silent devils that cause so much pain and limitation and causes, I think, or correlates with mental health struggles too. They seem to be very correlated. So whether, chicken came first or the egg, not sure. I would imagine though, and I see this all the time and I say this all the time, chronic pain often begets depression. Chronic pain and limitation and inability to work often begets severe anxiety. And in otherwise mentally sound people that have always been strong, mentally strong, all that. I see it all the time. And it leads me to believe that if almost any of us had such chronic pain that affected our quality of living and prevented us being able to self-sustain, we too would probably start to have the mental health issues of anxiety and potentially depression. So whether it's fibromyalgia directly or because of the pain, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Anyway, the Ninth Circuit reaffirmed that a person with fibromyalgia can present as alert, oriented, and even strong and still be significantly impaired. I've had close people, people very close to me with fibromyalgia, and absolutely can they be alert, oriented, and even strong. I mean, it's so ludicrous to think that they walk around being unalert, unoriented, and weak every second of the day, as if they were run over by a truck that particular day. It's just such a misunderstanding of the entire diagnosis, the whole impairment, I guess, generally speaking. This is why we often refer to fibromyalgia and doctors who are or are not fibromyalgia literate. I do understand why there is an aversion to embracing it more, and it's, I believe, largely because of the lack of diagnostic test results, blood markers, things of that nature, which is why as practitioners, we often want to see. And often, I don't think I've ever had a fibromyalgia case that when you dug into it, the person had more than fibromyalgia. They were just so focused on the fibromyalgia. That's the only thing they noted on their claim. So when it comes to me and we dig and say, well, you're 52. Are you sure you don't have any other little arthritises or anything going on? Because, when we hit our 50s, things just tend to happen to the vast, vast majority of us, irrespective of having some horrible diagnosis like fibromyalgia on top of it. Okay, so that was the first major boo by the ALJ by just throwing away the treating provider's opinions on how limited she was because she has normal strength on that day, reflexes, and no assistive device was used. Okay, the second thing Adriana shares is the superficial symptom evaluation. She says, in this case, the ALJ leaned on treatment notes showing pain improvement. But again, the court emphasized fibromyalgia waxes and wanes. It's not a solid steady every day. Sometimes it's far worse. Sometimes it's a little worse. Sometimes it's baseline. Sometimes you probably have a good day. It is really, really inconsistent. And that's probably one of the most frustrating things about it. Although I'm sure everybody's loving their good days. I mean, one thing we always focus on good days and bad days. And we try to get the explanation on the bad days and how frequently they are. It's another thing to know. How often do you have your bad days when fibromyalgia? For most people, they have the days where it puts them on the couch all day. So how often is that? How many days a week? How many days a month? Yeah, follow? They point out that temporary relief does not mean sustained improvement or functional recovery. The third thing, and this I thought was good to be mentioned, they brought up listing 1409, and I pulled it up just so I could, 9D to be specific. Now, 1409 is inflammatory arthritis. So there's A, B, C you could try to prove under, and then there's D. And I'm going to just read D to you because this is the one that they were trying to get the ALJ to find that she equated this listing, meets the listing, presumably. D, repeated manifestations of inflammatory arthritis with at least two of the constitutional symptoms or signs, severe fatigue, fever, malaise, or involuntary weight loss, and one of the following at the marked level. We'll go into marked versus extreme in a minute. So again, there has to be repeated manifestations, showings, and you want them to be probably showing up in the medical record of inflammatory arthritis, even though we're talking about fibromyalgia, with at least two of the constitutional symptoms or signs. Those symptoms or signs would be severe fatigue, malaise, fever, or involuntary weight loss. I will tell you, I've never had a fibromyalgia client who did not have severe fatigue and malaise. Fever, involuntary weight loss, a little more inconsistent. So just saying. And it says you need at least two. Well, severe fatigue, malaise. Okay. And one of the following at the market level. So you have two of the things we just talked about, and then one of the following at the market level. A limitation of activities of daily living, a limitation in maintaining social functioning, and a limitation in completing tasks in a timely manner due to deficiencies in concentration, persistence, or pace. So I'm just going to say them again. Limitations of activities of daily living, limitation in maintaining social functioning, and limitation in completing tasks in a timely manner due to deficiencies in concentration, persistence, or pace. And those are often, that third one is often mental health limitations when we have other mental disorders such as depression, anxiety, etc. Okay, so I just want to pop over to the definition of marked for you so that you can at least have that in your brain, because I really think there's a lot of fibromyalgia people out there. I have a bunch of them, but again, always with a secondary comorbidity, or third, tertiary. Okay, so marked. As per DI, if you want to look it up, 5225.020, how we define marked and extreme limitations. Under marked, this is under B. The SSA said that they will find that you have a marked limitation in a particular domain when your impairment interferes seriously with your ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. So that's an or. So either difficulty, serious difficulty with ability to independently initiate or sustain the activity, or just to complete the activity. It says your day-to-day functioning may be seriously limited when your impairments limit only one activity, or when the interactive and cumulative effects of your impairments limit several activities. Marked limitation also means a limitation that is more than moderate, but less than extreme. It is the equivalent of the functioning we would expect on a standardized testing with scores that are at least 2 but less than 3 standard deviations below the mean. I'm not even going to go into that math concept there of standard deviation, so let's skip over that. And then I'm going to pop down to extreme. So marked is less than extreme. For extreme, it's going to sound a little similar though, guys. We will find that you have an extreme limitation in a domain when your impairment interferes very seriously with your ability to, so it's very seriously, notice that difference, with your ability to independently initiate, sustain, or complete activities. I'm trying to see if there's anything. Extreme limitation also means a limitation that is more than marked. Extreme limitation is the rating we give to the worst limitations. However, extreme limitation does not necessarily mean a total lack or total loss of ability to function in whatever functioning we're talking about. So you do not have to be, for instance, bedridden to have an extreme limitation in your ability to ambulate, for instance, walk. They say it is the equivalent of functioning. Oh, they're going to go into standard deviations again. I'm going to skip that. Okay, so you have marked and you have extreme. Less serious than marked is moderate, and less serious than that is mild to none. Okay, and that's how the SSA kind of words things. So let's go back to Linnae. So again, we're at D, that they had argued the fibromyalgia should be considered under that listing, which is for inflammatory arthritis. However, it could potentially equal the listing, not necessarily meet it. The ALJ offered no rationale, they say, for concluding, sorry, long day, that fibromyalgia didn't equal the listing. As the court stated, less than ideal clarity is one thing, but no explanation at all just won't fly. So they weren't just, the lower court, or the ALJ, I should say, was not just less than ideal clarity. His decision, his write-up about the listing. He was worse than that. He had no explanation at all about why she didn't meet the listing. He must have just rejected it or didn't even address it. The fourth area, ADLs, which as you might know is activities of daily living. Whenever you see that, ADLs are technically what they're kind of asking you about on your function report. Some people call it an ADL report, but technically it's function report - adult. Anyway, so section 4 of this Linnae case and the ways that they really jabbed at the ALJ for really screwing up. ADLs and symptom testimony. The ALJ dismissed plaintiff's statements about her limitations based on daily activities, but failed to account for the nuance that she could do these activities only with frequent breaks and time off. That is not inconsistent with disabling limitations. It is textbook fibromyalgia. So again, the ALJ dismissed the plaintiff's statements about her limitations based on daily activities, but failed to account for the nuance that she could do these activities only with frequent breaks and time off. That is not inconsistent with disabling limitations. It is textbook fibromyalgia, pointed out by Adriana, I'm sure. And that is true because people with fibromyalgia often are able to do the basic caretaking, for instance, for their home. They might not be climbing on the roof, but they're doing the basic low-level interior stuff we try to get done. Some of us better than others. I'm really bad. If you need frequent breaks, and we talk about this all the time in function reports, because this is a really common, obvious result of chronic pain. Frequent breaks are often needed to go lie down, recline, because pain grows. It's like it becomes exponentially worse as time goes on, as opposed to being just a steady discomfort. And I think that's why people often need to go take a break, rest it, get it back to baseline, hopefully, or not far above, kind of regroup, and then have the fortitude to go do a few more household chores for another 15 minutes or whatever their time frame is. So very, very good, very, very, very good point. Adriana shows her favorite quote from the circuit court judge's opinion, says, "Nor are medical records stating that plaintiff was alert and oriented during her doctor visits a valid reason. Plaintiff being alert and oriented is not inconsistent with physical limitations given by doctors L and Valley." So I guess, again, they were using that, and we kind of alluded to it before. Being alert and oriented should never refute in and of itself claims of pain when someone has a diagnosis that would cause pain. First of all, I mean, it's the natural repercussion of fibromyalgia. Again, we see this so often, it just makes me cringe, because to knock a case simply because every time the person is seen by their doctor, they are able to pull it all together and act like an adult human being and not make a spectacle of themselves is somehow therefore disputing that they have this condition at all. And ironically, if you think about it, I don't know if there's such thing as mild fibromyalgia. If it was mild, I don't think you'd ever have gone for a diagnosis, because it would be like just the rest of us, little mild stuff, and we just push through our day because it's mild. And I think the whole point about people ultimately getting very limited in their ADLs and their social life and all these things are because, by definition, to me, fibromyalgia is never mild. It's just never mild. Could there be variations way above that? For sure. Adriana points out that so many times we see ALJs citing alert and oriented findings to deny claims. It's absolutely nonsense, she says, and I totally agree. And this case calls that out. So she points out what she finds to be an insight one might want to take with them. If you have fibromyalgia, and for representatives who have clients with fibromyalgia, frame the record around fluctuation. That's the waxing and the waning, right? Fatigue and functional limitation, not just physical exams. I would throw in the malaise too, although it's funny, fatigue and malaise seem very similar to me. But I think malaise might be more of we should just look it up, kind of like a emotional aspect or a mental aspect to just fatigue, which is in a sense physical. And then malaise is when your brain, your emotion, your mood are just in a malaise. So it goes hand in hand. And I do think oftentimes when we have chronic fatigue, which fibromyalgia tends to share to us, we will have malaise. I see that frequently. And it's funny because if you see depression and you see fibromyalgia, inquire about malaise, get into the meaning of malaise, because I think that will help actually point to that 1409D listing, which expressly requires two of those four constitutional symptoms or signs, and malaise was one of them. And sometimes we have to make sure our words are spot on, because all these different words have slightly different meanings oftentimes. And if we're not being careful with our wordage, I think it can be a problem. Okay. She notes that if an ALJ skips over the longitudinal context or fails, that would be the duration of how long you've been treating for the fibromyalgia. I know I talk about duration a lot with my clients. Or fails to tie the evidence back to the listings, you may have a good appellate ground. So that is really, really powerful. I wish this was a published case. It's not for publication, which means it's just controlling that one case. It's not really controlling the rest of the circuit. And it's funny because our circuit courts do not control, one circuit court does not control another circuit court. And that's how it's always been an understanding under the law. A federal circuit court controls the downward from itself, not someone else's, not some other circuit court's downward from itself, right? It controls those little superior courts within, but not those superior courts over there. And I know on the national stage lately, this is completely separate, guys. We've had district court cases, which is lower than circuit court, trying to make orders that cover the entire country and other branches of government. Flabbergasting that they even got away with it. Flabbergasting and truly dangerous. But anyway, okay. So that's it. Great, great, great. Thank you, Adriana de la Torre. That is awesome. I like it. I like it because the fibromyalgia is really so prevalent, like I said, guys, and it is very subjective in nature. So all of these long-term treating providers, and if you can find yourself a fibromyalgia literate doctor, some rheumatologists are, some of them practically pretend it doesn't exist. Like they just disregard it as not even being a real thing. They'll tell you to go see your shrink. It's really infuriating. But there are some that do. And if you can't get one that does, because I like the specialist idea, a chronic fatigue specialist, those are very hard to find too, might also be one who is sensible enough to have delved into and be literate in fibromyalgia studies. If not, hopefully your primary care, that's your main go-to, right? That person might be the one you have to rely on. But you want to talk about your symptoms a lot, and hopefully they're a good recorder. And then potentially they do a medical source statement and an opinion, like Dr. L and Dr. Valley did, it appears in this case, on top of their records. But don't get too upset if a doctor won't do that. That is very, very common that they won't. It's far more common that they won't than they will. But then what we need is their records to be competently articulated. That's a challenge. Okay, but also a talk for another day. That's it, guys. The Lene case, I thought it was great. I'm going to keep it in close quarters with me with all my fibro cases. So I will talk to you later. Bye.